I listened to about 30 hours worth of podcasts of them like recounting some of the stories and kind of shrunk that into a single article. We actually released the French version today. It's been translated into about 10 languages now, I think.
Nice.
And so it at this point, it's sort of a guide to community adoption of Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
and has been helping people in different areas of the world as they're thinking about how do I replicate what Bitcoin Beach is doing. How do I do that? And so that's been great.
I live unbanked off of cryptocurrency, and I use Bitrefill extensively because it lets me pay with crypto at places that don't yet accept it directly. This one service, more than any other, helps me live on crypto, pay your prepaid phone bill, or buy gift cards to thousands of major retailers around the world, all with cryptocurrency, including for exact amounts so you don't have to buy more gift credit than you need for a specific purchase. You can use Bitrefill without an account, but if you get an account, you can earn rewards points, which translate to savings, and you can also hold a balance denominated in dollars or euros to protect yourself against market crashes. Go to bitrefill.com, click Create Account, and enter the referral code DCN, or follow the link in the description. Hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of speaking with the one and only Andrew Begin today. How's it going, man?
It's going well. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you quickly start out with just explaining like your roots in crypto, who you are, what do you do, where do you come from, where did you go, that whole thing.
Yeah, sure. I have a similar maybe Bitcoin origin story to to many, which is that it passed me by in very early days. I had a boss who bought some in 2011
Mm-hmm.
or so, and it was too technical for me and kind of flew right by me. I historically have worked in digital marketing, experience strategy
Mm-hmm.
worlds, um, and I think really it had this existential sort of problem with the current system of that we live in,
Mm-hmm.
and despite building great digital products and you're always thinking about how the system is not really supporting inclusion, privacy, and really not really incentivizing the right things. And so when I sort of came back around to Bitcoin again, and this was only say 2 and some years ago now, it clicked immediately. I started thinking about the potential impact of a truly decentralized money and natively or internet native digital money and what that really means. And so I fell into the Bitcoin rabbit hole very quickly and very hard,
Mm-hmm.
and consumed really everything I could. Fast forward to coming up on about a year ago, and really was seeing Jack Dorsey, who's somebody who I believed sort of followed along in the traditional kind of fiat
Mm-hmm.
world, and his Twitter and Square and everything else, really pushing toward like Bitcoin being he said at Bitcoin conference, this is the most important thing that I believe is we can work on in my time. I That really pushed me to say, and he launched a hardware wallet project that same day as well. Really pushed me to say, you know what, it's time for me to leave the old world behind and start working on Bitcoin myself. And so that's what led me to Galoy. And so really excited to be working at Galoy, and I can give a brief overview of that as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's I'm sure a lot of people are starting to fall deep in the rabbit hole, and it is one of those kinds of things. It's almost like the internet, when people realize there's something like the internet out there, and it starts from like, well, I guess I'm sending emails instead of like snail mails. But when you get it, it's just like, man, this is everything is different.
Right.
And there's some of that magic to the internet right now. Like, for example, as I like to say, you and I right now are basically having a telepathic conversation that people all around the world can kind of tune into, especially when it's live, which this one isn't. But like when you do live shows, it's really it's something next level that I don't think a lot of people really got, but people tend to get that. And so when you get this, that someone like Jack Dorsey, who came out with one of the social media pioneers, which
Right.
doesn't seem to mean the other pioneers seem to be losing steam, whereas Twitter seems to be in its heyday right now. You kind of see that like he did that, but he doesn't see that as the biggest thing. Kind of causes you to move over. And so, where did you go right from there? Did you go right from just rabbit holing to Galoy, or did you go anywhere before then? And also, is Galoy something that you founded or just started to work for?
So right to Galoy, and I did not found it. I joined um, 8 months ago or so. The team, a quick background. So Galoy built the Bitcoin Beach wallet, which many of your
Mm-hmm.
listeners may be aware of. And so, Bitcoin Beach in El Zante started using Bitcoin in, say, 2019. In 2020, our founder, Nicholas Berthet, traveled down there and said, I can kind of help, with this project of this experiment at the time of can we use Bitcoin as, to create a circular economy, and that spawned into the Bitcoin Beach wallet, which is built on top of the open source Galoy Bitcoin banking platform. And that's really what we do. So I joined in, again, 8 months ago or so in a marketing capacity. We're a small team, about
Mm-hmm.
16 or so, and so we all do wear many hats.
But they all say
But
Galoy on them.
they all say Galloway on them, yeah. And yeah, so it's been really exciting, taking this from, what was a pilot project pre Bitcoin law in El Salvador to, the spotlight being shined on El Salvador, and really taking, what Galloway is doing underneath the Bitcoin Beach wallet, and building that out so that other community, and again, it's open source, so other communities or companies or governments can really replicate that and launch their own wallet and get their communities using Bitcoin over Lightning, to build their own circular economies. And so, that's been an exciting 8 months or so.
Yeah, so to recap the whole thing, I mean, I think the average crypto person, has probably heard of there was this Bitcoin Beach thing where people started using Bitcoin specifically through Lightning, but yeah, Bitcoin uh, in a certain beach in El Salvador.
Right.
And then that kind of was a proof of concept that was instructive in the adoption on a much wider capacity of the currency in the country. Now, as far as the Bitcoin Beach wallet, and what exactly does that entail? How is it different from just a regular Bitcoin or Lightning wallet? And like, why was there a specific wallet involved?
Sure. So the when the project, so Bitcoin Beach is launched out of what was already a community initiative out of a organization, or a place called Hope House,
Mm-hmm.
where there were people. Their goal was to keep kids out of gangs. Provide, when you listen to Chimbera and Jorge speak about some of the origins of Bitcoin Beach and Hope House, they speak about dreams and hope, right. They don't talk about hard money, right.
Yeah, of
They're
course.
talking about like solving real problems in their community, and turning El Zante itself in a community where people don't feel like they have to leave, right, which is really what was happening in the past. And so, just as a quick recap, there was a donation of Bitcoin in 2019, and the donor was saying, the one string attached is like, I want to see Bitcoin be used. I want to see if it can be used as money. And so they started off actually using on-chain Bitcoin, and as and many of your listeners will know, that's in terms of waiting for blocks, and it's a little bit slow. The fees can flux quite a bit, and so using Bitcoin on chain to buy a 50 cent papusa is not exactly going to get people off of using physical cash. It's not
Yeah,
easier. It's
for
not
sure.
quicker. Um, And then they started using some other Lightning wallets, and what Nicholas and Mike talked about in early days in building the Bitcoin Beach wallet is really circularity in the economy requires the merchant uh, side as well as the person spending Bitcoin. And so in developing the Bitcoin Beach wallet on the ground in El Salvador, there were a lot of um, interactions designed that helped with that circularity. And so on the merchant end, making it extremely easy to receive Sats for their goods and services. One example of this is a lot of the early merchants accepting Bitcoin or say a restaurant or a small, pupuseria or something like this, where to when somebody's paying, the person is making food, they've got to stop, wash their hands, go over, create a lightning invoice, show the phone, etc. And so, the early days of designing the wallet were like, how do we make this easy? There was no LNURL, which would,
Yeah.
or a static QR code, right? And so we designed some solutions for that, and printed QR codes that made it easy. And so some of these sort of to circle back to your question about why a wallet, it was really about designing within the context of a community trying to use Bitcoin as money over the Lightning Network. And so that was really, there's a lot of insight. We actually published an article called Bitcoin Banking for Communities that goes through 6 lessons that we learned, that Nicholas and Mike Peterson learned in building the Bitcoin Beach wallet. And I joined the company a little bit after, but I listened to about 30 hours worth of podcasts of them
Hmm.
like recounting some of the stories and kind of shrunk that into a single article. We actually released the French version today. It's been translated into about 10 languages now, I think.
Nice.
And so it at this point, it's sort of a guide to community adoption of Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and has been helping people in different areas of the world as they're thinking about how do I replicate what Bitcoin Beach is doing. How do I do that? And so that's been great.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think is lost on a lot of people is people don't understand the jump between any crypto to finally using it. Like so many steps in between that whole thing, and um, unfortunately, a lot of people experience that in just having like PayPal like at it. And so they just keep using the same app as they were before for other payments, and now they just use a different thing, which ultimately is how a lot of adoption is unfortunately going to go. But like, I mean, I've been buying things with Bitcoin since 2013, since like early mid 2013 and on, and from that to other coins to everything, just the interoperability problems and just like, oh, this did this go through? I don't know. Did it go through? And this doesn't scan this QR code for all like the crap in between makes it just really hard. And not to mention, where do you spend it? How do you know where you can actually do it? Do you have to like look for a sticker? Like, is there a map somewhere? Does anyone update the map? And just like all this kind of stuff, and just crunching through that to make a standardized thing is kind of the crypto adoption struggle. And I think that's a smart way of doing things is to try to provide a unified experience for a small controlled area where people are likely to create this sort of circular economy.
Yeah, and you mentioned where to spend. So one of the Bitcoin Beach wallet has 4 tabs along the bottom. There's
Mm-hmm.
kind of your home screen, which is where you can send and receive, right, and see your balance. There's contacts, so people who you pay regularly. This is a common, type of thing in, say, a PayPal or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a Maps tab, and so you'll go and you can actually look, and there's pins popping up all around the world. There's communities using the Bitcoin Beach wallet in Peru and Guatemala. But this really helped. You can not only can you find the vendors where you could spend Sats, but you can pay them from that map as well. You can say, okay, pay this vendor. And so again, it's like removing some of the friction from the vendors or the merchant perspective of like, oh yeah, just like click on us on the map and you can pay us. Which there's something, as I mentioned, the core banking platform that we built, that Bitcoin Beach Wallet is built on, it's not just a wallet. There's modules. There's things for accounting, the backend API. The wallet, right? The mobile wallet is one piece of the platform. And I'm not sure if you've heard of Bitcoin Jungle in
No,
Costa
not yet.
Rica. And so this is a team in Costa Rica who they came up to Nicholas in I think at the Adopting Bitcoin conference in El Salvador, and they said, "Hey, we're going to launch. We've forked the code. We're going to launch a wallet." And Nicholas at the time, it was still I think early where Nicholas was like, "Okay, we'll see," and was
Hmm.
next thing you know, they've launched the Bitcoin Jungle wallet. They've been onboarding merchants for the past 3 or 4 months. We just
Wow.
had a project call yesterday where they're designing a Mercado feature, a marketplace, which is both for a map for vendors. There's potential for people who want to sell things to use this marketplace, and with aspirations of contributing that back to the open source platform. And so we're starting to see like the flywheel of people starting to get engaged and develop on the platform, and really excited about the potential of really having communities anywhere in the world be able to to replicate this in a similar way, and customize it to the context that their communities have, and then contribute back to the platform as they see fit.
Yeah. So what are the extent of the features possible by the platform? So I mean, obviously you can build out, have a merchant app, have a user wallet, have like a directory of merchants, and like what else can you build in there?
I mean, the it's really, I mean, it's up to the imagination. I think as
Hmm.
when you think about we have an API, it's available. People can really uh, build integrations into other apps and services, or build apps that would get make their way upstream into the wallet, right? So the Mercado
Yeah.
feature, as an example, is one of the latter, something that may make its way into the mobile wallet itself. We have a web wallet, which will enable people to get up to speed fast without the need for getting into at your app stores, and some of the things that
Hmm.
that entails. And there's we're starting to see some of the integrations come online, and things getting interesting. So there's a browser extension called Albi, and you can spend. It's kind of like if you know some of these discount or like coupon browser extensions that recognize you're on a site, and it's like, oh, we have coupons for you. It can actually recognize a Lightning address in your browser, and you can just send Sats right out of the browser, and you can think about how this starts to really enable that concept that people talk about with the Lightning Network, which is streaming Sats, or like paying a few Sats to read an article, and kind of breaking down that old, the old subscription model of spending $20, to try and read an article on a
Yeah.
site that you never come back to. Another thing that I think is really interesting, that we're testing and working towards a launch of, is the ability to hold and send USD over the Lightning
Hmm.
Network without a stable coin. And so, using derivative contracts, essentially, we're going to enable people that use the Galoy wallet, or Bitcoin
Hmm.
Beach, or Bitcoin, any of these wallets, to send money from their Sats. They're holding money in Sats in their wallet today, to say, you know what, I have $200 worth of Sats, and I have rent coming up, or I have to buy something for my store, and if the price of Bitcoin were to fall, I wouldn't be able to meet my financial obligation. So they can transfer money into dollars, and hold that in dollars versus Sats, and so they can protect themselves from volatility within the app, right? Which is
Hmm.
which is
Interesting.
really big, because when you see these communities adopting Bitcoin, one big thing that is necessary is like a Bitcoin ATM, right? To kind of make the connection that, like, okay, I have this digital thing in my wallet, and I can go to an ATM, and I can get the physical cash that I'm used to holding out of it.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
as as well as removing themselves from the volatility, right? Until they're either, until they learn about the volatility and how, over time it's trending upwards. Um, I think that in these communities, it's interesting because folks like yourself, like myself, many of the people who are developing in Bitcoin and Lightning are we came to it via some of the interesting principles, via hard money, via
Hmm.
privacy, via permissionlessness. And we then are like, wow, this is amazing as a payments network. Whereas in a community like El Sante, 70% unbanked, I believe they
Yeah.
were. And so they were using physical cash. This actually enabled them to use digital transaction for the first time. So, like, when you're going into communities like this, you can't go in preaching preaching sound money, right? This is not the way. And one of the lessons that we learned is it's more about saying, hey, get this wallet, and I'm going to send you, you know, 10 cents worth of Satoshis,
Hmm.
and then you're gonna send me 5 cents back, and having them experience it versus like internalize all of the merits of the network. And so um, in that way, when it's volatile, they don't necessarily understand why yet, right? And so providing that stability within their wallet, I just think it's going to unlock, well, let's say, reduce a lot of concern and friction that currently requires a little bit of effort today. So, like, for instance, in Bitcoin Jungle, um, they launched their wallet at these ferias, which are farmers markets, and they offered to cash merchants out at the end of each week.
Yeah.
And so for the first like week or two, they said, maybe 60 or 70% of merchants were coming to cash out into colones, to cash their sats out that they earned. And week after week, that number dropped and dropped and dropped, and now merchants are saying, "Never mind, I'm good. I'm going to hold my Sats that I earned at the market." So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see how quickly Bitcoin Beach took a couple of years long of a project, and you're seeing sort of that again, that flywheel start to pick up, and adoption, people learning from each other and accelerating each other's efforts.
Yeah, that's all. It's been interesting to see how the space has sort of grown. I think we're kind of in what I would call the golden era of stablecoins right now, where we're starting, and I think it's like the last hurrah kind of that, because before it was just like volatility was a big problem that didn't have a solution. Now there's so many stablecoin type options, so many USD denominated type options out there. They're starting to come into their own right at the time when it's becoming the least attractive of all to hold anything denominated in a fiat currency because of the inflation stuff. Like, I got into this space to get out of that world. And at the same time, you can't deny reality of like, oh, I got some Bitcoin like 11, like I got some, it's like $130 worth now. And now it's like 1100. That's great. But then it crashes all the way down to 198 or whatever it was at the bottom, that 2015 kind of bear market. Or like you do see that loses a lot of value during that period of time. But now that I'm starting to see prices bend before my eyes, like my $16 haircut at the beginning of 2020 was 18 by the end of the year, and now is 22. And you're starting to see that kind of stuff happen. It's starting to become kind of like the Venezuelan experience. And one of my friends, Lorenzo, who's from Venezuela, he lives in El Salvador now, working on the crypto scene over there. Just like the perspective of the money is always sort of tanking, whereas crypto tanks, but then it goes up, you know? And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when people don't want that kind of dollar value anymore.
Yeah, I think it's also, again, like the context of different viewpoints or countries, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
each context is different. With, we're seeing the Central African Republic, right? And they're using a CFA
Mm-hmm.
currency. El Salvador was interesting, right? Because they're using the dollar. um, and even there, one of the stories that really grabbed me was the concept of saving in many areas of the world, especially areas without bank accounts, is is a little bit foreign, or it's just not possible to be you don't want to hold dollars, right? And you actually don't have a bank account. And so one of the stories was that in El Salvador or El Zante, um, people would buy cinder blocks because, like, if they're like, okay, I want to add on to my home, I know that the
Hmm.
price of cinder blocks only goes up over time. And so if I buy them because I have an extra $20, like that's an asset that I can hold. That's harder than the
It's
dollar, right? And
investment.
yeah, and so I think with now and what we saw with, or what we're seeing and saw with Alzante and we're seeing elsewhere is businesses and people that want to earn sats and hold sats are seeing that over time, that increase. And this is an asset, right? Like they didn't previously have access to assets, right? Like in many areas of the world, it's like you buy a house and you buy stocks and you've got 401ks, and there's all of these things that people use to store value over time that are until now have not been accessible to people, and to billions of people around the world. And so it's just really exciting. And with the USD wallet inside of a Lightning wallet now, you're allowing my partner at Galoy, one of my colleagues has a great analogy, which is like it's kind of like a room that you can come back to, right? Like where you're used to it, right? Like I'm holding
Yeah.
dollars and I know it's like it's leaking and and melting over time, but it's comfortable. I like it, like it's something
Hmm.
I know, and so you can really decide how much of that of how much of the volatility you're willing to be exposed to, as you learn about, again, the properties of Bitcoin and like how it why it's volatile, and how it really evolves over time. And so yeah, it's pretty exciting. We're excited to get that into market.
Yeah, and it's also kind of the where we've been as far as the size and scope of things. Like back in the early days of Bitcoin, like the number of users, the number of transactions on the network, like the number of people, like it was just so small, which makes it easier to do, ups and downs and stuff of value. Whereas, like, I think a lot of people this last bull cycle were really they're overestimating how high Bitcoin would go there because they just thought like, oh, in the past it's gone, through the moon, but like now it's becoming larger and more stable finally. And even outside of the Bitcoin world, the number of like the market capitalizations of most of the top coins are kind of where Bitcoin was at not too long ago. And so even the new entrants, they're just like new and they can just come in and get a bunch of value. They're kind of in that like slow and immovable sort of zone compared to the volatility of the past. And so also, I think what we've seen with the dollar, like the dollar is finally volatile. You know, like it was always losing value, but you couldn't see it really. You have to get up really high to see it. But now it's like people are seeing in it like every few months there's a change in prices. Not just gas went up. Gas has always gone up, but they're seeing everything went up, and then everything went up again. And the dollar is the best fiat currency, kind of.
Sure.
That's the top of the pack. But what
Right.
happens? What about down the pack? Like, what are people seeing there? And so
Yeah.
I can't even imagine like the instructiveness of hold crypto. Of like, why don't you have a few thousand sats and just keep it like that and see what happens versus your other money. I think the instructiveness in the developing world is starting to become really clear. Like the message sinks in a lot faster.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting in the States because I think for a while, um, uh, you know, or maybe I'll invert that. Like, I think there are places in the world where people get Bitcoin immediately, like on a
Hmm.
conception. They're like absolutely right. Like
Yeah.
there's independence, there's autonomy associated to it. There's privacy from whatever version of government you have. There is this there is a fixed supply, right? There's protection from inflation, and the other, and also there's connectivity, right, to the world, right? And so like it, it it solves many problems that people have all over the world. But one of the things that I talk to some friends about sometimes is like Bitcoin solves problems that a lot of people in the states don't have yet,
Hmm.
or don't see. To your point, right? You zoom out far enough, and like we have those problems, and it's been one of the books that really struck a chord with me. It was The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, where
Hmm.
he really builds these shows like the idea of like technology is deflationary, yet we're built on a system that requires inflation, right? And these two things are pulling at each other, and there's only a matter of time like that has to change. And so I think that like to your point, in the States, people are starting to go, you know what, wait a minute. The other thing is uh, is lightning, right?
Hmm.
I was at down in Miami for the conference a couple weeks ago, and you see Robinhood integrating the Lightning Network. You see Cash App is already implemented Lightning, and they're continuing down the path. And you really start to see how the frictionless use case, like the world could almost be flipped onto using Lightning, or using like Lightning rails to send value by Square enabling Lightning invoices on their payment terminals, right, for millions of merchants around the world. And so that was something that actually our founder wrote about sort of early on in Galoy's days, was like Lightning as a retail payment system, which really brings this idea that people compare like, okay, Bitcoin. You don't compare Bitcoin to Visa, right? You compare Bitcoin to Fedwire,
Yeah.
and the Lightning Network is the one that can disrupt Visa. And I think that now you're seeing Fidelity, Credit Suisse, you're seeing all like the biggest companies in the world go, you know what? Actually, that's the truth. I mean, like, you can save 10x on fees at least. And from a merchant perspective, like getting a couple percent back on transactions, like that solves a real problem people have that they didn't know they could solve, right? And so I think it's a really interesting time for the U.S. or other countries with the more stable currencies, where people are starting to see how much uh, the problems are starting to be exposed, right? And the water line is starting to drop, and they're starting to go, you know what? There's better alternatives.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to see because still the average person in the US who uses crypto, they probably use it through something like, let's say, a crypto.com debit card. That they have their crypto, they swipe it, and they get like a few percent back or whatever because it's a rewards thing, which just got slashed in half, but whatever. That's kind of the most people's exposure to that. And I think that the amount of money being left on the table by using these antiquated processors, the amount of like friction left on the table isn't nearly as much because it's just what the world's on today. And it's just like, oh yeah, put your crypto into the old system. But then as soon as people start doing the new system, all of a sudden it's like, is a merchant going to really care to go through a bunch of, nonsense? They can take this weird digital payment they don't really know, and then, okay, they save a few cents on this transaction, but then else other friction, maybe not. But if they can start seeing like hundreds of dollars of fees piling up over like the course of a year, and just they get to cut that out, and also they get to have more customers, go pay them more international customers, or those people have more money to spend because they're not just living on fiat and just losing a giant chunk to inflation. That's when the stuff starts to. That's when the more it's kind of a more background process, probably developed countries, right? Whereas developing countries, they just don't have the infrastructure, period, and then they can just bootstrap into a top of the line infrastructure because that's what crypto is. You don't need to like land in the country. You just start connecting your nodes and you're there. Whereas in the developed world, it's a lot more of a, you got to start seeing behind the scenes. If you re-engineer the infrastructure of the payments world, then all of a sudden you start seeing this giant like cost savings thing, just right there for the taking.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in the developing world or the areas of the world that are less connected to the financial system, or rather, the areas that are higher dependent on remittances, for instance, you see that, right? And so El Salvador was one, right? I think it was $400 million they could save on fees from, companies that, were taking, 8, 10, like depending on how much you're sending. Like you can't, you in the past, you couldn't send a small amount of money to somebody in El Salvador to help them, buy something, right? Without getting, paying crazy fees. I think they were set to save $400 million. Tonga, I think 38% of their GDP is in remittances, right? That's a small island nation. And like when you cut those fees out, and so Lord Fisitua is, former member of parliament there, and the way he kind of explains it is like when you're taking folks who are already either living paycheck to paycheck or don't have savings, and you're cutting the fees out of that, like a, they can increase their standard of living, and b, they can start to think about, wait a minute, I lived on that amount before, well, what if I started to stash some sats, right, into the future. So that's just crazy. And then yeah, in the states and everywhere else that is well connected, when you start to see like, wait, this is a peer to peer, like this could be a peer to peer payment, and I don't need it to take the time and the money to go through multiple different parties of exchange to settle, right? Like it can
Mm-hmm.
settle now, and it can settle for almost free. And so I think that for the people that are in this space, like reloading Twitter every 30 minutes or 30 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like these things, we're waiting for the next country or the next company. But if we start to zoom out, this is happening so incredibly fast right
Yeah.
now, right? In the past like year has just been crazy in terms of uh, adoption. And I think that with El Salvador was just like, I think launched an explosion of interest, and study, right? And countries are figuring out what to do that fits within their own context and structure, right? With Panama, Panama, you've got Madeira and Prospera, two areas that are looking to adopt Bitcoin and enable it in the ways that work within their constitution and their governments, right? And so that I think that is what we're seeing is people trying to navigate. I think many people are starting to see the value of not only adopting sort of a Bitcoin standard, but of being early, like, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing you're the asymmetric advantage of being on the innovators end of the chasm. And it's really an exciting thing to watch. And I think that for companies like us, like we're just trying to uh, be as sort of connected and helpful as possible, because the biggest thing that is lacking, or that maybe the biggest challenge, is education, right? Because moving from the fiat world into a peer-to-peer permissionless global network of Bitcoin is like, um, it's hard to overstate how big of a change that is. And when you think about things like self-custody and to your point earlier, interoperability is still a challenge. As countries decide to say, yo, we're going to adopt Bitcoin, like there's a lot of there's so much work to do after that, right?
Yeah,
Like
of
that's when the
course.
work begins. And so you're seeing like El Salvador has a great program called Me Premier Bitcoin, My First Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like classes and certificates and real curriculum, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is so important, because if you go down, we had a Twitter space about this as well, with somebody who lived on Bitcoin for like I think 40 days or 2 months or something, like only Bitcoin. And what you end up seeing is if you're in a store, you end up having to show the merchant how to use their Chivo wallet to generate a Lightning invoice to be able to pay that merchant, right? And
Yeah.
so the onboarding and the education is the need for it is massive, and it's I think it's going to be like that for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, haven't been paid in fiat since 2015, and just the years of going through that, it's made me kind of. I never was interested in the payment space at all, like at all, and now just I kind of have to by default of living this way, where it's pretty often that when I try to go pay in crypto somewhere locally, uh, well, these days it becomes it's a lot smoother. But there were some times when I had to say like, no, 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 call the owner. You do take this stuff. It's this app. See right here. Do this. Ring it up like this, and then show them how to do it. And just it's a lot easier if the owner is there because they can kind of take. They have the power to take your word for it. Whereas like the regular employee gets scared that they're doing something wrong. But it is like a massive change from And part of the thing is uh, the card world is like so kind of sketchy. It's like it all like goes through or doesn't go through, and it doesn't tell you why for a million different reasons. Like the merchant knows that. On the other side, I've been helping some local like crypto startup try to figure out how to do like a crypto card, and then just going with the error codes that they get. And I'm just like, wow, like, if I try to send any crypto anywhere, I can figure out pretty quickly what happened. Did it send? Go straight to a block explorer. Is it there? And if it didn't send or if it's not confirmed, like you just know it all. Whereas a card will just decline and you have no idea why. The issuer might. They'll sell like, oh well, it got rejected because this was like a under whatever the hell, whatever it is. But like you're just kind of left out in the dark. And I have to say, I like not living with that anxiety of you just don't know if your payment's going to go through kind of thing or you just don't know if there's going to be a charge on it. The big one is just the the money that you don't need permission to use, which is, it sounds like it's like a buzzword like that we say, but it's true because I do remember living on modest means with a bank account, how you never know what you're going to find when you open up your banking app. You never know how much money is going to be in there for sure, because someone could hit you with a charge. You don't know, like, whereas with your crypto wallet, you got like, if you got like one Bitcoin, if you don't get hacked, you still have that until you push some out. No one can just have access to just take some out whenever you want. And it's a big like lifestyle change that when people start to deal with, it's scary to deal with like financial self sovereignty because that means you're responsible for everything. But at a certain extent, it's liberating. Like if I could go back to being Mr. Banked, living on fiat and stuff, I think I'd hate it. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to go back.
Yeah, it's kind of like where we started this conversation of
Hmm.
like, once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Once you have a new and a better way, the tagline that they kind of print on their swag and stuff down in Bitcoin Beach is "El futuro está aquí," right? Like the future is here. And um, when I visited, have you been?
No,
Um,
unfortunately, I'm
when,
gonna have to travel next year or so probably.
yeah, when I was down there, it really was something amazing, right? Like I haven't. I mean, you yourself, I
Hmm.
think are spending more locally in the states and stuff like that. For me, there was a street band playing with a QR code taped to the keyboard, and as I'm walking by, I just scan, hit send, and I'm like, that actually is faster than any other payment. Actually, Pierre Rochard from Kraken was just on I think Stefan Livera the other day and saying, the Lightning Network, like there is no faster way to pay between a Lightning Network, payment between two nodes, right? Like and like when people experience it, it's magic. And like the cool thing is it's that way whether you're in person or whether you're sending value over the internet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that I actually was mentioning this the other day because I've been trying out some services that use sats online. So Stacker News is like a news aggregator for Lightning news. Vita is a app that you can require people to pay you small whatever you say for to send you a message to kind of fix the spam issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or video call you, and you can set your own limit. And the experience of paying like small fractions of a dollar instantly
Mm-hmm.
is something that like once you experience it, like I could just see like that being like a killer app or use case for that just feels like this is the way it always should have been, right?
Yeah.
Like right now the paying for stuff online is so clunky and so slow and so right, like it's just not great. It doesn't feel like it's native to the internet. But these services like that, and like I mentioned Albi with the sort of the browser plugin where you can just flip like 20 sats towards somebody to I think that's just magic. And like to I don't want to be connected to the fiat banking system longer, really any longer. And like I said with Brian Harrington, conversations with him, I think he's doing a lot for people to think about that, and
Yeah.
to continue the shift away from believing they need to rely on the banking system and to what you can live on sats.
Yeah. Well, this has been quite the fascinating conversation. Where could people find more about what you do and everything?
Yeah. So again, Galoy is open source Bitcoin banking software, and so you can find us on GitHub at Galoy Money. The spelling is there. I don't know if it's going to show
Mm-hmm.
up the right way.
Yeah, it
We're
should be.
also on Twitter at Galoy Money. The website is galloy.io. Personally, AG Begin on almost every platform. So happy for folks to reach out. Yeah. Also, adopting Bitcoin is a Lightning summit that we held in El Salvador for the first time last year, and we're going to be holding it again this November. So the announcement is going to come out. So that's at Adopting BTC on Twitter, and so stay tuned there. It's going to be an awesome conference, especially for people that want to go somewhere and just experience like a place in the world where Bitcoin is legal and they can just pay for Lightning. Buy a coffee with Lightning for whatever.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Well, yeah, well, thanks for being on, and yeah, I hope you have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks. It's been fun.